Good morning, everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Shailendra Deolankar. Dr. Deolankar has completed his MA from Pune University, and he is also the recipient of the prestigious Yashwantrao Chavan Gold Medal. He has received JNU Chancellor's Appreciation Certificate for MPhil dissertation. Dr. Deolankar has done his PhD from American Studies School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. Presently, he is working as a professor at the PG Department of Political Science, Government Vidarbha Institute of Science and Humanities, Amravati. Dr. Deolankar has more than 20 years of experience, and he has been associated at a very senior level with various renowned government and prestigious organizations. Dr. Deolankar has written, edited, and published 20 books. He has received 25 academic awards and scholarships and has written more than 500 popular articles. It's pleasure to have you with us, sir. Now, I would request Dr. Deolankar to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are perfectly audible, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Tilak, Maharashtra University and the Department of Journalism for inviting me to share my thoughts on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. I presume that the students of the Department of Journalism, most of the students of Department of Journalism are here. I mean, some faculty members might be here also. So this is a technical type of issue, and I had an initial discussion with madam, and then at that time, in fact, just in order to make this issue easier to understand, and so that you can digest it also, so I will use both Hindi and English language. In fact, I always love and prefer to articulate my thoughts in my own mother tongue, that is Marathi. But of course, I mean, as she informed me, some of the students, they belong to out of Maharashtra, and it would be easier for them if I can narrate it in national Hindi language and then English. So we will prefer both the languages. Most of our discourse will remain in English. But sometimes if there are some technical terms, just in order to get it clarified, I will also use the Hindi language. Well, I mean, this is the ongoing Russia and Ukraine conflict, which has now almost entered into the third week. And there is no sign of settlement so far. In fact, some news are coming up. And according to those news, I mean, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has come down to some terms of negotiation. In fact, they have clarified that Ukraine is not going to join the NATO. Moreover, they are ready to negotiate with Russia on this Donbass region. And even the Luhansk and Donetsk, these are the two independent regions to whom Russia has recently declared as separate nations. Okay, but Russia is still not clear whether he will satisfy with these two completions. Russia has some different plans, and you never know what Putin is, contemplating. In fact, it's very difficult to read the mind of Putin. And now the war has converted into a hybrid type of war. Okay, hybrid type of war means it's almost playing at dual level. Okay, initially it started as a conventional warfare between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, the conventional warfare means the armies of two nations come face to face and they fight with each other. That is a conventional warfare. But now it has been, it learned that Ukraine has involved some mercenaries. Okay, and these mercenaries come from across the Europe, and now they are also, shouldering or rubbing the shoulder with the Ukrainian soldiers. So now it has become a hybrid type of war. See that at the same time, this war is being played at multiple levels also. I mean, Russia and Ukraine are fighting the conventional war. Of course, NATO and America, they have already invoked, more than 5,000 sanctions against Russia. So now this is again the war at the economic level also. And the third, that is very important from your perspective, I mean, from this media perspective, that it is also being played at the information level, that we call as the information warfare. Whatever the news, what we are getting, I mean, Russia is quite poor in their, media or their propaganda machinery. But in that case, Europe and Ukraine, I mean, the entire Europe is stand by the Ukraine, America is standing by the Ukraine. And whatever the news we are getting it in India, mostly that belongs to the media, social media, electronic and print media of Europe and America. So we are getting the news colored by this media, and the entire European media and the American media, now they are involved into, painting Vladimir Putin as a villain, okay, Russia as a villain, and trying to project the image of Russia as they have invaded the Ukraine, they have violated the international law, and so far. So Russia is now culprit as far as the European media is concerned. So this war is also being played at that level. And as we know that even Elon Musk has already allotted his Starnet. I mean, that is a special satellite, okay, that has been given to Ukraine. And now the Ukrainian President Zelensky, he always comes on the screen, and he, through his videos, he delivers the speeches, and then, that how they have killed the Russian soldiers, how they have destroyed the Russian military infrastructure. And that is what the news we are getting. But we are not still getting the Russian perspective on this aspect. So in this media or, information warfare, somewhere Russia is lagging behind. So this is the present scenario and situation. In fact, if you can ask me that how long will this conflict, or will this war will remain continued? So my answer will be that, in fact, America and NATO both are interested to prolong the war. That is the first contention that you will need to understand. Okay, both are interested in prolonging the war, and that's the reason why they are supplying Ukraine with huge arms. Okay, and that is the reason why the war is getting prolonged. So what would be the ultimate aim of America in this by prolonging this war? So that is pretty clear. Okay, through this war, in fact, it's like an instrument in the hands of America, that they want to prolong the war so that they can destroy Russia economically. Okay, because if the war gets prolonged, the sanctions will get more stringent. Okay, and Russian, I mean, maybe in a due course of time, the impact of this economic, I mean, all these restrictions, that Russia will also feel the hit, and that's what they want. So what ultimately the outcome will be? Okay, the ultimate outcome will be that Ukraine will get destroyed physically, Russia will get destroyed economically, Europe will lose its peace, Europe will lose its energy sources. Okay, and even in case of America also, America will also have some losses because of the financial losses. And who will get the ultimate benefit? The ultimate beneficiary will be China. The China is watching this war at a distance, and the ultimate beneficiary will be China. Okay. Now let's come back to some basic questions, since there are, most of the students, so that let's try to, make it more easier. Okay. And I will ask, we will raise some questions and try to, answer those questions, so that it will be easier for students to understand the entire topic. Okay. Now let's start with Ukraine. Okay. Ukraine, I mean, geographically also and strategically also. Very briefly, we will try to understand the importance of Ukraine. Ukraine is the largest country in the Europe, largest country. It has a strategic location. I mean, it connects both Eastern Europe and Western Europe. The population of Ukraine is almost 4 to 5 crore, and they have almost huge army or standing army as far as the human manpower is concerned. They have a standing army of almost 3 lakhs, soldiers. In fact, that is bigger than Russia. Okay, Russia has an advanced military technology with them. That is the second advance in the world. But if manpower, if you are looking at it from the perspective of manpower, okay, the Russians are lesser than the Ukraine. Okay, Ukraine has a largest manpower force in Europe also. Then Ukraine is also in fact hosting Europe's biggest nuclear plant. In fact, when Ukraine was a part of Soviet Union, okay, I will come down to that part also. I mean, earlier Ukraine was a part of Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, which was disintegrated in 1991, and that time Ukraine got its independence and it became an independent nation in 1991. Okay, and after that, in fact, till that time, till 1995, the Soviet Union's all nuclear arsenals and their nuclear plants, they were located in Ukraine. So Ukraine was extremely important to Russia also. Then Ukraine is a world's third largest supplier of corn. Then Ukraine is world's largest. They have the repository of lithium oxide, which is very important while making the batteries of mobile phones. Okay, and that's a very important ingredient that is being used in mobile batteries. So they have the highest repository of lithium oxide also. Then in case of production of barley, which is now being used to make the beer everywhere, almost across the world, Ukraine also exports that. And moreover, in fact, Russia shares its borders with the Ukraine. Now, how this problem has arisen? Now, the second important question after the getting importance of Ukraine, why it is important to Russia also. So, if you are looking at it from the Russian perspective, Russia shares its border with the Ukraine. Okay. Now, why Russia invaded Ukraine? That is the second important question that we need to understand. As far as Vladimir Putin is concerned and his foreign policy and security policy vis-a-vis Ukraine is concerned, in fact, he has almost 3 important objectives for invading the Ukraine. The first important one was that the Zelensky, the present president of Ukraine, and his inclination or his pro-West policies and his open, declaration that Ukraine is going to be the member of NATO, that is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This is a military organization which was created during the Cold War, after the Second World War in 1949. And it was created to protect the West European nations from the Soviet Union. In fact, it was created to contain the expansion of communism in Europe. So that organization, which was actually purely security and military in nature, and this organization is based on a principle, and that principle is collective security. That is, what is collective security? Collective security is a term or is a type of agreement in which if enemy attack any member state of NATO, then the attack will be considered on all the member states. So the entire NATO will come together and resist that attack. Okay, so that is the principle of collective security, and NATO is established on the principle of collective security. In fact, it was created during the Cold War. But when this Cold War, which lasted for almost 45 years, from 1945 to 1990, immediately in the aftermath of Second World War, so most of the military organization and agreements which were created during the time of Cold War, like CATO, CENTO, Warsaw Agreement, all they came to an end with the end of Cold War. The Cold War came to an end in 1990-91 with the disintegration of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was exploded and it cut down into the pieces, and 15 new nations, they came into existence. So, but NATO is the only organization which still survives even after the Cold War. Okay, and in order to make NATO its survival, relevant, America is in search of enemy. Okay, try to understand this very important argument which I'm going to make now. देखिएगा कि कोई भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन को अगर आपको उसको बचाना है, अगर आपको उसको किसी भी तरह से कंटिन्यू करना है, तो आपको उसके रिलेवेंस के कुछ कारण ढूंढने पड़ेंगे. ओके, यू विल हैव टू एक्सप्लोर द रीजंस व्हाई द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन शुड एग्जिस्ट. So after 1991, American foreign policy is always oriented to identify the enemies so that NATO can survive. तो वो अगर एनिमी नहीं है, एनिमी का डर नहीं है, तो NATO का रिलेवेंस के लिए क्वेश्चन मार्क. Then the member state will raise the question, then why NATO should survive. So immediately after 1991, पहले अमेरिका ने सद्दाम हुसैन को अपना एनिमी बनाया. Okay, then the NATO intervened in Iraq. जब सद्दाम हुसैन का खात्मा हो गया, then international terrorism आ गया. Then ओसामा बिन लादेन was made as an enemy. फिर उसको आइडेंटिफाई करने के लिए अफगानिस्तान में NATO चला गया. जब ओसामा बिन लादेन खत्म हो गया, then Islamic State was identified as a new enemy. Then NATO सीरिया में चला गया, फिर से इराक में चला गया. Then Islamic State, now it has almost become a history. Now it is no longer exists even in Iraq and Syria. There are some sporadic, sporadic instances or examples of their survival somewhere in the world. लेकिन उनका जो बेस था सीरिया और इराक में, that was dismantled by NATO. अब Islamic State चला गया. Now they are in search of a new target. So now the new target is Russia. Okay, new target is Vladimir Putin. अब अगर if you are looking it from the American perspective, of course America is now trying to see the logic for the survival of the NATO. अब NATO के जरिए अमेरिका ने क्या किया है? NATO के जरिए अमेरिका ने अपने सोल्जर्स जो है वो यूरोप के भूमि पे रखे हुए हैं. उन्होंने अपने जो न्यूक्लियर मिसाइल्स है, न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स है, that they have kept it in Germany, Belgium, ये नेशंस में रखे हुए हैं. अब ये वॉर भी हो रहा है, तो who is at loss? European nations, they are at loss. Okay, Ukraine is at loss. अब ये इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें हमको अंडरस्टैंड करना जरूरी है कि रशिया और यूरोप का रिलेशंस क्या है. तो प्रेजेंटली रशिया इज द वर्ल्ड लार्जेस्ट, सेकंड लार्जेस्ट प्रोड्यूसर ऑफ क्रूड ऑयल एंड वर्ल्ड नंबर 1 प्रोड्यूसर ऑफ नेचुरल गैस. अब यूरोप, जो वेस्टर्न यूरोप है, उसमें एनर्जी का मेन सोर्स नेचुरल गैस है. और जो टोटल यूरोप का नेचुरल गैस का सप्लाई है, इस ऑलमोस्ट 45% सप्लाई ऑफ नेचुरल गैस इज बीइंग बोर्न बाय रशिया. रशिया ने ऑलरेडी 2 बड़े बड़े पाइपलाइंस डाल के रखे हैं. वन पाइपलाइन इज कॉल्ड, दैट्स द फर्स्ट पाइपलाइन दैट गोज थ्रू द यूक्रेन, दैट इज नॉर्ड स्ट्रीम 1. और ये नॉर्ड स्ट्रीम 1 से सारे वेस्टर्न यूरोपियन नेशंस को रशिया नेचुरल गैस प्रोवाइड करता है. ओके, देन नाउ द नॉर्ड स्ट्रीम 2 which has already been constructed, वो है रशिया और जर्मनी के बीच में. Now the only distribution level or some sanctions from the German chancellor has left now. Okay, लेकिन वो अगर हो जाता है तो then रशिया का एक्सपोर्ट, मैक्सिमम एक्सपोर्ट ये यूरोप को है. So they are the beneficiaries. अब now what will happen? Now America has already invoked sanctions against Russia. So now they will pressurize, America will pressurize the European nations that they will also, invoke sanctions, simultaneous sanctions. So Europe will no longer get the Russian gas. Okay, maybe in the future. So इसमें who will at loss? Europe will be at loss. Okay, even if this war get expanded and some other nations get involved into it. Okay, so European nation will be at loss. America का इसमें कोई loss नहीं है. That's first thing that you need to understand. Okay, so लेकिन उसमें main player अमेरिका जरूर है. Okay, and अमेरिका का logic है because now America is targeting, two things. First, that they have to find some ground for the survival of NATO. That's the first thing. And secondly, Russia is their target. Okay, so now they can economically make Russia bankrupt, and that's the reason America invoked more than 5,000 sanctions against Russia. Okay, so ये important चीजें है. Now Ukraine in 2024, Ukraine is almost going to join the NATO. अब ये जो NATO ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, ये जब रशिया का डिसइंटीग्रेशन हुआ था, दैट टाइम it was promised by America and NATO that the NATO is mostly a West European nation organization. Now they will not expand, okay, towards eastern side. अब ईस्टर्न साइड जो यूरोप का है, वो सारे रशिया के पहले पार्ट थे, सोवियत रशिया के पहले पार्ट थे, जो द पार्ट ऑफ erstwhile Soviet Russia. Then Soviet Russia was disintegrated. Now what NATO is doing? NATO is not, following its commitment. NATO ने कमिट किया था कि they will not expand eastwhile, लेकिन NATO is continuously expanding eastwhile. और वो क्या कर रहे हैं कि now they are making the all Russian neighbors their members. ऑलमोस्ट जो 15 नेशन रशिया को डिसइंटीग्रेट होने के बाद में 15 नेशन जो क्रिएट हुए थे, उनमें से 12 नेशंस ने NATO ज्वाइन कर लिया. ओके, नाउ यूक्रेन एंड कपल ऑफ नेशंस आर लेफ्ट, बट यूक्रेन इज व्हाई इंपॉर्टेंट. इफ यूक्रेन जॉइन्स NATO, then NATO will come down to the Russian borders. Okay, then what will happen? Then America will again install its nuclear weapons, missiles in Ukraine. Okay, and from Ukraine, destroying Moscow will be a matter of few minutes. 3 या 4 मिनट में मॉस्को को आप डिस्ट्रॉय कर सकते हो. So for Russia, it's an existential threat. Okay, so how can Russia will tolerate that aspect? और ज़ेलेंस्की तो चाहते थे कि they want to become the member of NATO. Okay, अब important चीज ऐसी है कि that Russia don't want. Okay, Russia also don't want Ukraine to join the European Union. अब बड़ी इंपॉर्टेंट चीज आपको सबको समझनी चाहिए कि ज़ेलेंस्की जरूर चाहता है कि नाउ दे बिकम द मेंबर ऑफ NATO और दे बिकम द मेंबर ऑफ यूरोपियन यूनियन. लेकिन उन्होंने एप्लीकेशन कब किया है? इन 2008 यूक्रेन अप्लाइड फॉर द मेंबरशिप ऑफ NATO. 2008. नाउ इट्स 2022, बट NATO हैज नॉट ऑफर्ड मेंबरशिप टू यूक्रेन. Then Zelensky क्यों पीछे पड़ रहे हैं इन सारी चीजों के? That is a very important question that needs to be raised. Secondly है, अब ये यूरोपियन यूनियन का भी मेंबर नहीं बन रहा है. यूरोपियन यूनियन is also not ready to make them as a member. Okay, there is a differences among European nations also. तो ये इतना बड़ा जो अभी वॉर खड़ा किया है जेलेंस्की ने, और इट्स अ वॉर ऑफ ईगो, कि जेलेंस्की चाहता है कि हमको NATO ज्वाइन करना, कि NATO is not ready to accept it. यूरोपियन यूनियन इज नॉट रेडी टू एक्सेप्ट यू. और रशिया की इतनी डिमांड थी कि आपने NATO और यूरोपियन यूनियन में नहीं जाना चाहिए. ओके, लेकिन ये चीज को बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रखना चाहिए ख्याल में. सो देन व्हाई दिस वॉर इज बीइंग प्लेड एंड हु इज प्लेइंग दिस वॉर? ओके, तो इसमें से क्रिस्टल क्लियर है कि ये वॉर को प्रोलॉन्ग करने में NATO एंड अमेरिका इज प्लेइंग वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल. इसमें होली काउ कोई नहीं है. रशिया has violated the international law. Yes, it has violated the international law. It has invaded a small neighbor. That is fact. Okay, लेकिन इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि यूक्रेन होली काऊ है. यूक्रेन बिल्कुल होली काऊ नहीं है. ओके, जब NATO और यूरोपियन यूनियन आपको मेंबर बनाने के लिए तैयार नहीं है, why are you insisting that thing? You are instigating Russia for that matter. That is the first important. Secondly, यूक्रेन क्या कर रहा है? Now Ukraine has called the mercenaries from across the Europe to fight against Russia. वो मर्सिनरीज आ चुके हैं, जैसे अफगानिस्तान में हुआ. थर्ड क्या कर रहे हैं वो? नाउ दे आर इन्वॉल्विंग सिटीजन्स आल्सो. देखिएगा अभी जो सिटीजन्स, ऑलमोस्ट 1300 सिटीजन्स हैव डाइड इन दिस वॉर. ये सिटीजन्स कैसे मरे हैं? बिकॉज रशिया इज कमिटेड दैट दे विल नॉट अटैक, दे विल अटैक ओनली ऑन द मिलिट्री इंस्टॉलेशन एंड एयर बेसेस. लेकिन ये क्या कर रहे हैं? ये मिलिट्री इंस्टॉलेशन पर सिटीजन्स को लेके आ रहे हैं. तो सिटीजन्स आर डाइंग इन दिस वॉर. लेकिन अगर सिटीजन्स को वहां पर सिटीजन्स मर रहे हैं तो उनको जिनेवा प्रोटेक्शन नहीं मिलेगा. तो जिनेवा प्रोटेक्शन है कि अगर आप सिटीजन्स को भी सोल्जर्स के साथ में इन्वॉल्व करते हो तो दे विल नॉट गेट द बेनिफिट एज अ सिटीजन. ओके, तो ये यूक्रेन इज ऑल्सो एट फॉल्ट. ये ऐसा नहीं कि यूक्रेन भी होली काऊ है. NATO इज ऑल्सो एट फॉल्ट. ओके, अमेरिका इज ऑल्सो एट फॉल्ट बिकॉज दे आर प्रोलॉन्गिंग इट. अब देखो वो जावलिन नाम का एक मिसाइल उनको सप्लाई कर रहे हैं अमेरिका. तो 600 जावलिन मिसाइल्स हैव बीन सप्लाइड बाय अमेरिका टू यूक्रेन. अब ये जो मिसाइल है ये कोई बड़ा डिस्ट्रॉयर नहीं है. दिस डिस्ट्रॉय टैंक्स. वो इसलिए है कि वो प्रोलॉन्ग हो रहा है वॉर को. ओके, अब इंपॉर्टेंट चीजें ये है कि ज़ेलेंस्की को अंडरस्टैंड करना पड़ेगा. तो व्हाट अल्टीमेटली ज़ेलेंस्की विल गेट आउट ऑफ दिस वॉर? दे विल गेट द कंप्लीट डिस्ट्रॉयड, फिजिकली डिस्ट्रॉयड यूक्रेन. ओके, वो इंपॉर्टेंट चीज उनको अंडरस्टैंड करनी चाहिए. नाउ इट्स Zelensky has almost become a proxy of America, proxy of NATO. Okay, and they are playing with Zelensky. Through Zelensky, they are targeting Russia. Okay, ये उनको अंडरस्टैंड करना जेलेंस्की को बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. हाउ लॉन्ग दिस वॉर विल रिमेन कंटिन्यू. जितना ये वॉर बढ़ेगा उतना यूक्रेन का डिस्ट्रॉय ज्यादा होगा. देखिएगा, रशिया के अगेंस्ट में अगर भी इकोनॉमिक सैंक्शंस है तो रशिया विल गेट द पिंच आफ्टर सम टाइम, बट यूक्रेन इज फेसिंग द प्रॉब्लम एट द स्पर ऑफ मोमेंट. और ये सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट बात है दैट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड. सो इसमें देयर इज अ ग्रेट पावर पॉलिटिक्स इन्वॉल्व इनटू इट. ओके, एंड दैट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड. Because Thomas Friedman, he has authored a very important, very famous book, and I mean, some of you might have read that book also. The world is flat. Okay, ये किताब लिखी गई थी immediately after the end of Cold War, and at that time the economic globalization, the process of economic globalization was getting momentum. और उस टाइम में उन्होंने लिखा था कि now there is no great power politics. Okay, now world has become flat, economic interests have become paramount, and war has now almost become redundant. War has almost become the history. Okay, nations are more interested in economic cooperation and trade and business and all these things. Okay, against this argument, I mean, Francis Fukuyama came out with another politics that great power politics will remain continued even in case of economic cooperation. और अभी हमको फ्रांसिस फुकुयामा का जो थ्योरी है that is more relevant. Yes, great power politics इसमें है. ये this war, though it is it is being played between Ukraine and Russia, the great powers are involved in it, and now they are calling the shots. ये important चीज है, हमको याद रखना काफी important है. अगर if you are looking it from the global perspective, now in India we are almost 6,000 kilometers away from Ukraine and Russia. Okay, but we are discussing this war scenario, its implications and everything in India also. So why are we discussing it in India? I mean, are we going to affect through this war or what? That we need to understand, and that's a very important, crucial, that understanding this war from the Indian perspective. Okay, now what immediate implication of this war, I mean the economic implication on international market, was a hike in crude oil prices. In November-December 2021, the crude oil prices, I mean per barrel of crude oil, it was priced of almost $65 per barrel. $65 per barrel. Okay, now it has almost become $130 per barrel. Okay, and India imports Brent crude oil. There are two types of crude oil in international market. One is a Brent crude oil which India imports. Okay, and second is WPI. That is the oil which is being produced by America. Okay, America is the world's #1 producer of crude oil, #2 Russia, and #3 Saudi Arabia. Okay, so we import the Brent crude oil, and out of our total import, the import of crude oil constitutes almost 40% of our import. Okay, 40%. And whatever is India's requirement, out of this requirement, we import almost 80% of Brent crude oil, and we import it mostly from Saudi Arabia, Iraq. Okay, and Iran. In fact, we used to, but now we have stopped procuring from Iran due to the American pressure. And some oil we take it from America also, some from Venezuela, and some from Russia also. Okay, so now what will happen? Let me tell you from the economic perspective. Okay, I will try to be very simple even in my arguments also, so that you can understand. अगर इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में क्रूड ऑयल का प्राइस $1 से बढ़ता है, $1 से, तो हमारा जो हम बिल पे करते हैं उसमें राइज होता है $2 बिलियन का. Even if the crude oil price get hiked by $1, okay, our immediate loss is $2 billion. अगर क्रूड ऑयल का प्राइस $10 से बढ़ता है तो our current account deficit means that is a gap between import and export. Our current account deficit is net $15 billion, $15 बिलियन है. तो अब जो ये हाइक हुआ है, it's almost twice. Okay, 60-70% hike. So India at the spur of moment is at the loss of almost $55 billion. Okay, $55 बिलियन का हमारा immediate loss है. Now we will start getting the pinch of it. There were election scenario. I mean, the central government has still not decided to hike the price of petrol and diesel. But how long will you contain it? You have to increase it, because as the war gets prolonged, there is all possibility that the prices will get hiked again. Okay, ये हम deny नहीं कर सकते. तो आप एक्साइज ड्यूटी कम करोगे, बिकॉज सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट इनवोक एक्साइज ड्यूटी ऑन क्रूड ऑयल, और जो स्टेट्स है वो उस पर वैट लगाते हैं. आप कितना एक्साइज ड्यूटी और वैट को कम करोगे? सो देयर इज ऑल पॉसिबिलिटी दैट द पेट्रोल एंड डीजल प्राइसेस will get hiked by almost 15 to 20 rupees in India. In Sri Lanka, now they have immediately getting hit. In Sri Lanka, the petrol prices have raised by 50 rupees and diesel prices have raised by 75 rupees. And that is the same scenario in Pakistan also. So India cannot, isolate itself for a long time. We will also, the common citizen will also have to, get the pinch of it, and that maybe in the next 1 week or we will get this scenario, or we will expose with this price hike also. That is the first important thing. अब देखिएगा इसमें क्या होता है. If the petrol and diesel prices get hiked or raised, it will ultimately yield to inflation. अगर ये $10 से बढ़ता है पेट्रोल और डीजल का, क्रूड ऑयल का प्राइस, तो our inflation get raised by almost 1%. अगर 1% से इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ जाता है, तो डिमांड जो मार्केट की है वो डिमांड गेट रिड्यूस्ड. हम रेफ्रिजरेटर महंगा हो जाएगा, टीवी महंगा हो जाएगा, मोबाइल्स महंगे हो जाएंगे, फूड प्रोडक्ट्स विल गेट वो भी महंगे हो जाएंगे. तो दैट विल अल्टीमेटली अफेक्ट ऑन डिमांड. अब जब डिमांड कम हो जाएगा, तो डिमांड कम होने के बाद में आप देखिएगा इंडिया का जो जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट है, now in 2022 it has been projected that India's GDP growth rate will be 7.9%. okay, तो इसमें ऐसा होता है कि in GDP the part of demand constitutes almost 55%. अगर डोमेस्टिक डिमांड आपकी अच्छी है तो ही जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट मेंटेन रहेगा, बिकॉज डिमांड इज अ कोर. और डिमांड अगर कम हो जाता है तो दैट विल अफेक्ट ऑन द जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट. अब क्या होगा कि ये जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट विल गेट डाउन, और इन्वेस्टर इन्वेस्टमेंट नहीं करेंगे तो अल्टीमेटली इट विल अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट. सो दिस इज अ विशियस साइकिल, एंड दिस विशियस इकोनॉमिक साइकिल दैट इंडिया कैनॉट प्रोटेक्ट इटसेल्फ फॉर अ लॉन्ग टाइम. ये अल्टीमेटली यहाँ पर होने वाला है. सो इंडिया विल हैव टू स्ट्रगल टू मेंटेन द जीडीपी ग्रोथ रेट. अभी जो दिसंबर, जनवरी और फरवरी का जो कलेक्टिव 3 महीने का जीडीपी ग्रोथ है, वो इट हैज ऑलरेडी कम डाउन टू 5.2%. तो ये मेंटेन रखना इंडिया के लिए बड़ा प्रॉब्लमेटिक रहेगा. इट्स अ वेरी डॉन्टिंग टास्क. इट इज वेरी प्रिकैरियस टाइप ऑफ एक्सरसाइज फॉर इंडिया टू मेंटेन दिस टाइप ऑफ जीडीपी ग्रोथ. दैट इज द फर्स्ट इम्पैक्ट दैट इंडिया विल गेट. द सेकंड इज दैट वी प्रोक्यूर फ्रॉम यूक्रेन the oil, I mean for the domestic, that the oil which used for the cooking purposes, and that is soya, that is sunflower oil. Out of our requirement, we import almost 80% our requirement getting fulfilled by Ukraine. Okay, they are our largest supplier of the sunflower oil. Okay, so if that supply get disrupted, then ultimately the oil prices will get high. तो आपको डोमेस्टिकली भी जो कॉमन सिटीजन है उसको पिंच होगा. देन पाम ऑयल जो इंडिया इंपोर्ट करता है उसका भी प्राइसेस बढ़ गया है. ओके, दैट इज ऑल्सो इंपॉर्टेंट. देन द सप्लाई ऑफ नेचुरल गैस थ्रू रशिया हैज ऑल्सो गॉट डिसरप्टेड. इंडिया ऑल्सो इंपोर्ट एलएनजी. एलएनजी का प्राइस ऑलरेडी बढ़ चुका है, इट्स नाउ $52. ये अफेक्ट करेगा कुकिंग गैस पर और आपके सीएनजी पर. दैट्स द इंपॉर्टेंट वन. देन वी इंपोर्ट from Russia the coal also, the coal which is very important to generate electricity in India. अगर coal का supply disturb हो जाता है तो ultimately the electricity, there will be problem in raising the generating the electricity. Prices might hike also. Then it will affect on the real estate sector. How it will affect on the real estate sector? Because we import almost, Russia is our second largest supplier of steel. अगर स्टील का प्राइसेस बढ़ जाता है तो अल्टीमेटली रियल एस्टेट पर भी उसका इंपैक्ट होना ही होना है. इट हैज ऑलरेडी इंपैक्टेड ऑन द गोल्ड प्राइसेस. It has already impacted on the share market that we already witnessed. And then very important aspect, that is the lithium oxide, which I already mentioned earlier. Now, India has become the world's second largest manufacturer of mobile phones. Okay. Now, the world will get Apple and Samsung mobile phone, which has been manufactured in India, in a course of time. Okay. So, if in case we are not able to get the lithium oxide from Ukraine, ultimately it will impact on the prices of mobile phones also. Okay. So, ये भी सारी चीजें, even we import barley from Ukraine, and that is being used to produce beer in India, that will also get impacted. Okay, ये चीजें हम देख रहे हैं, but there are some positive side also. Like collectively, Ukraine and Russia constitute the supply of world's 40% wheat. Okay, गेहूं जिसको बोलते हैं हम, वो गेहूं का 40% सप्लाई रशिया और यूक्रेन की तरफ से होता है, and that rotates through the Black Sea. But now Black Sea is almost it's not deadlocked. Okay, जो सारे ports थे यूक्रेन के, that has been destroyed. Now it is already occupied by the Russia. तो ये wheat का supply disturb हो गया है. Now India has got the chance to fulfill that gap, to bridge that gap. और इंडिया के wheat को बहुत market price बढ़ के मिला है, और India is now exporting more wheat. हमारा जो minimum support price है central government का wheat के लिए, that is 2100. But now the Indian farmers are getting almost 2500 to 2600 per quintal for their wheat. So ये हमारे लिए एक positive that is side. Then cotton का भी इंडिया का ज्यादा export हो रहा है, because cotton is being used for this synthetic fiber in oil production. तो वो सब affect हो गया है, तो इंडिया के cotton को भी अच्छा price मिलने लगा है. But except these two couple of commodities, we are, in total we are at the loss. So this is our simple prayer, that this war should not get prolonged. Okay, but as far as my analysis goes, okay, at least this war will get prolonged for another 10 to 15 days. There might be talks. Talks will remain continued. There's almost fourth round of talks, which is due in Israel. Now Israel is mediating in this war, and Zelensky and Putin both have agreed to meet in Israel. But I suspect whether any substantial outcome will be there, because Putin is adamant on its demand. The ultimate aim of Putin is a change of regime in Ukraine. They don't want Zelensky to remain continued as a president of Ukraine. They have their own candidate, and that is Viktor Yanukovych. Viktor Yanukovych was Ukraine's president in 2014, but then he was thrown out of power. Okay, in 2014, then he fled to Russia. Now he's still in Russia. So Putin might want to reinstate Viktor Yanukovych in Ukraine. So that is their ultimate demand. Then the second important demand is that Russia is trying to create a buffer zone between Ukraine and Russia. Okay, वो buffer zone है, Donbass जो area है, और वो buffer zone है. Then Russia also wants, because unofficially Russia has occupied Crimea. That's Crimea is one part of Ukraine, and that was illegally occupied by Russia, like POK, that has been illegally occupied, is a part of Kashmir, illegally occupied by Pakistan. अब रशिया चाहता है कि क्रामिया को ऑफिशियली रशिया का पार्ट करके डिक्लेयर किया जाए. I don't think that Ukraine will succumb to that pressure or that demand. First. Secondly, I don't think that Ukraine will again recognize Luhansk and Donetsk as an independent nation. वो भी possible नहीं है. So even if there are rounds of talks, whether it will yield any result, that is still a question. Okay, so I don't think that the immediate result will come out. Then this war is again, being played at different levels. So the mercenaries have involved, citizens have involved. Even if there is a ceasefire declared, I don't think that the mercenaries will stop attacking on the eastern side Ukraine. Okay, because where the Russian speaking crowd or population is highest in number. So this hit of this war will remain continued. Okay, but there are some important lessons that we can draw out of this war. अब ये lessons क्या है? Ultimately, I'm coming to the concluding part. ये क्या lessons को हमें draw करना चाहिए? The first important lesson that we need to draw from this war is that we were under the assumption, we were under the impression, and we used to believe that in this post-Cold War world, I mean after 1991, when economic globalization got momentum, nations started depending on each other economically. The international trade got expanded. Now see the trade between America and China. I mean, both have the problems on political issues, but the trade between America and China is $700 billion. What? $700 billion. Take the example of Japan and China. Japan and China, they are at war, almost at war on the issue of Senkaku Island. Okay, and anytime the war will break out. Okay, but the trade between Japan and China is $400 billion. Take the example of India and China. Now, since last almost 20 months, I mean, both are at loggerhead on border. LSA, China is claiming Indian territories. Okay, and China is not leaving a single opportunity to trouble India. But despite of that, China is selling worth $80 billion goods in India. $80 billion. The trade between India and China is worth $120 billion. Okay, so that clearly, I mean, that's the reason why we were under the assumption that the economic interest and trade will supersede the political differences. The political differences will not come into the way of economic cooperation and international trade, because nations are dependent on each other. And the world supply chain, now this has become very concrete. During Corona, this world supply chain got disrupted. Okay, even today also, the 100% manufacturing of America's national flag, that is being done in China. Okay, the Diet Coke, which is popular in Europe and America and even in India also, unless China provides the basic ingredients to this Diet Coke cannot be produced. Even during the course of this Corona time, I mean, whenever we go to the doctor or even through the electronic and print media, or even the government used to advise us that we need to consume the multivitamins, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin D, okay, in order to boost our immune system. Okay, because there is no medicine on Corona, but at least we can boost our immune system. So these vitamins we cannot produce, and as long as China provides us the basic ingredients, and that we call as this API, active pharmaceutical ingredient. In 2019, India procured or imported 53 API from China, and we paid them $4 billion for that purpose. Okay, so entire world was dependent on China as far as the global supply chain was concerned, but this entire chain got disrupted during Corona. So it was assumed by most of the academicians, scholars, that the war is now out of practice. War will never take place. There won't be any conventional war. So the Russia-Ukraine war has almost threatened, shattered that assumption. Okay, so war is now almost a reality. Okay, though there will be economic cooperation, trade, and everything, war will remain continued. That's the first lesson that we need to understand out of this entire conflict. The second important is that now see that in entire this Russia-Ukraine conflict, see the role of international organizations. See the role of United Nations. United Nations has not played a substantial role in this war. Okay, now in case of Ukraine, earlier America promised, NATO promised that they will directly involve, but now Ukrainians are fighting this war on their own. Okay, and now they are getting benefit indirectly. I mean, they are getting support indirectly, but not directly. Okay, but now the very important question that this war has raised, that who will protect the small nations in future? Now, suppose tomorrow China attacks on Taiwan. Now China is almost searching an opportunity, or in case China attack on India also. So will America come down to India's rescue? Will America come down to India's support? Will America come down to Taiwan's rescue? Because America earlier was a global power. It was a superpower. So America had almost taken the security guarantee of almost small nations. But now America has no longer remained a global power. Now America has no longer remained a superpower. America has exit from Afghanistan. That time only we got indications that America is now looking for their own interest. That is America first. Okay, they are not ready to fight the war abroad. Okay, so America is not going to come to their rescue. Then United Nations has almost become defunct. It has become a platform of the politics between the major powers. Okay, so who will stop China? Henceforth, Russia attack on Poland. Russia attack on again in future Romania. Russia attack on Hungary. Who will protect these small nations? So now this is a very important question now that has arisen, because I personally feel today's situation resembles with the situation that existed between the First and Second World War. The First World War came to an end in 1920, and the Second World War began in 1940. So between the First and Second World War, there were 20 years. In that 20 years, there were no international organization. In fact, there was a League of Nations, but the role of League of Nations was almost defunct, and the nations were their own masters. There were no the above nation institution or organization which will contain the excessive ambitions of nations. And in that scenario, Hitler and Mussolini came to the forefront, and then that led to the Second World War. Now, today the scenario is almost same. International organization, United Nations, G20, G7, NATO, they are not playing any substantial role. Okay, so I fear that this situation might give birth to some Hitler or some Mussolini. In fact, Xi Jinping of China is almost acting like a Hitler. Okay, now China is trying to expand its territory. China is claiming the lands of other nations. China is claiming the land of India. China is claiming the land of Taiwan. China is, claiming Hong Kong. Okay, they are claiming Macau. Macau has almost become the part of them. Then they are claiming several islands in South China Sea. They are claiming the island of Japan. I mean, that is Senkaku Island. So who will contain China? That's a very important one, because the international community has become polarized. And that polarization will lead this will lead to the birth of a superpower, of a dictator. And then there might be a possibility that the world will clash with another big war. And then the fourth important one is that now the nations, when they come to know that America is not going to come to their help, international organizations are not going to come to their help, then the nations have started paying more attention to their defense modernization. Now see that Germany has declared recently that they are going to spend $100 billion in order to make their defense system strong. Japan, which is a peace-loving nation, they recently declared that they are going to hold the nuclear weapons. South Korea, Australia, these nations are after the nuclear weapons, nuclear arsenal. Okay, in the same case, in future, this scenario will lead to arms race. Okay, and now what nations will do? The nations will divert the funds from health, rural infrastructure, and education to the military expenses. So now this is the fourth important implication, negative implication that we are going to witness as far as this war scenario is concerned. So we all pray and hope and pray that let's pray that this war will come to an end as soon as possible, and the world will get a sigh of relief. But I don't think that, that will happen maybe in a span of 10 to 15 days at least. Okay, and we will also have to burn the heat that in economically. And as far as Indian stand in this entire scenario is concerned, we have preferred to remain neutral, and that stand is pretty adequate stand, because we don't want to engulf or indulge into this type of rivalry. So again, there is a rebirth or rejuvenation of non-alignment stand, which was very popular during the Nehruvian foreign policy. Now it is better to keep aside, and then when you prefer to stay neutral, then you have a better scope to mediate also, and that's a very important, because Zelensky is calling Modi, Putin is calling Modi, and the world is looking at Indian stand, because India is a non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council. So India's role and India's stand matters a lot as far as the global politics is concerned. That also shows that the increasing importance of India in global politics. But after this war, let me tell you, as many scholars and academicians argues that China will be the ultimate beneficiary. At the same time, India will also rise as a important power in global politics, because Corona has already dented the economic growth of Europe, and now this war has again, like जिसको हम कहते हैं कि मराठी मध्ये आमची म्हण आहे की दुष्काळात 13वा महिना, म्हणजे this has already provided the double attack on the European economy. America has almost this Corona has greatly jeopardized American economy. There are more than 5 crore unemployed in America. The growth rate has come down. Even the European economy's growth rate has come down. During this corona crisis, the performance of Asian economies is comparatively better than the European economies. So the next time after this war, of course, Asia will get prominence. Indo-Pacific will get prominence. Asian nations will get prominence like China, India, Japan, South Korea, Philippines. The Southeast Asian nations will get prominence in the coming days ahead. So there will be some positive side also, and the world will again look at Asia on the entire politics. The 21st century politics will again revolve around Asia. So these are the some broad outcome. Out of this war. In fact, in this span of some 45 to 50 minutes, I attempted to touch upon various because these are the multiple angles. So I attempted to touch upon various angles and try to narrate and articulate it in a very easier language so that you can get a clear understanding of the entire matter. So though it is a technical in term, so I tried my level best.
Thank you so much, sir. So the floor is open for question and answer.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Sir, at the outset, my compliments for explaining this complete thing in such a simple way. And it's not an easy thing. It's a complex matter, and you've summed it up so very well. And I agree no less that, as you said, firstly, conventional war is now not going to be any more a myth. And also China will ultimately be the gainer. Sir, I have one question to you that like China stands to gain, how is it that the Indian foreign policy can cash on to this situation rather than being just neutral? And why can't we also cash on to it if in a way China is going to gain? I want to look at it as India also should be gaining. And there are talks like India is trying to get this ruble and rupee conversion and discounted oil to be taken from them. Then make in India, what we are already doing, we are already giving a hard time to the Chinese in terms of chemicals and various other things, because this kind of a situation, if is giving opportunity to China, then obviously I feel that it should be same for India as well. And somewhere at the end, sir, I find that yes, as you said, that America wants to prolong it, and ultimately it is going to become a guerrilla warfare, because it's been a war of ego all this while, and it is going to turn into a guerrilla warfare because Ukraine may not last long, and this hybrid warfare will turn into a guerrilla warfare. But Americans will continue to gain. But yet at the end, sir, after the COVID crisis, where America has lost so much, Europe has also lost so much, and now the credibility of Americans have gone down so very low as a global policing agency. And I feel, sir, why shouldn't the NATO be, all this is an outcome of the poor policies of NATO and the US. So why shouldn't they be, we should cash on to, rather we should take this opportunity to get all these organizations to close, which they themselves said that they'll not expand, but they've expanded it all this while. So all these things like the credibility of US and the small nations should, like all these oil producing countries like Iran and all, who are being bullied by the US, they will obviously be getting together with the Russians. And so ultimately, I see all this will involve a lot of foreign policy of India. And how can we cash on to all this?
Well, in fact, you have echoed what I had argued in my presentation. And what India is going to get out of it, I mean, in fact, by taking a neutral stand in this entire conflict, India has achieved a lot. Okay, why I argue like this? Because the war is taking place at such a time when India is having very tense relations with China, and there is all possibility that China, India may go for a war also, because China will probably catch this opportunity. And China already, I mean, earlier also in history, if you look back to the history, China had encashed this type of opportunity in 1962 also, when America and the then Soviet Union, they were at the loggerhead in Cuba, and there was a Cuban Missile Crisis, and China took the opportunity of that, and China had an understanding and a secret agreement with Russia that they will support Russia in the Cuban Missile Crisis, and in return, that if in case they attack on India, Russia will not intervene. Okay, so now the situation is almost same, but while taking this neutral stand, in fact, we have not displeased Russia, and because we are dependent on Russia as far as our the military hardware, import of military hardware is concerned, and we all witnessed that when the Galwan clash took place. At that time, the central defense minister Rajnath Singh ji, he paid or visit Russia twice, because we still dependent on Russia, because we want this S-400, that the first installment of S-400 has already arrived in India. The second is due. Now we are also engaged in negotiation with Russia on supplying of S-500 also. So we cannot antagonize Russia first. Secondly, as far as Europe and America is concerned, we have a very strong trade relations with them. Our entire trade with Europe and America, it constitutes almost $300 billion. And last year in 2021, we exported goods worth $73 billion to America. So we equally don't want to disturb our relations with America and Europe. So that's the reason we prefer to remain neutral, and that stand, in fact, that matters a lot. Okay, so that is ultimately we are gaining out of that. First, secondly, that now we still have a scope to mediate in this war, because like earlier we had intervened in Korean War, we had intervened in Vietnamese War, and that time also India played a role of mediator. So here also, if in case the situation demands, maybe in future also, because Modi has a great chemistry with Putin also, and he has very good terms with Zelensky also. They are at the talking terms, and that's the reason India can also play a role of mediator, and that's pretty possible scenario in the upcoming time. So what I mean to convey through this argument is that while remain neutral, in fact, we have achieved a lot. Now the real test will come little later. Okay, and that now, when, as you mentioned, that India is now planning to buy Russian oil, and Russia is also ready to provide us in a cheap prices. So at that time, there might be pressure from America that India should also join this economic sanctions against Russia, because earlier when America invoked economic sanctions against Iran, that time Donald Trump pressurized India, and that time India also stopped procuring oil from Iran. So, but this time probably India will have to see that how they will manage the scenario, because that will be the testing time for Indian diplomacy and Indian foreign policy. We should get the waiver from America, and now the second installment of S-400 that is still pending, and that is due maybe in next few months. Okay, so America will again pressurize India not to buy this military arsenals from Russia. At that time also, now it will be a test of Indian foreign policy, how India will maintain the autonomy in its foreign policy decision making. So like China, India, because so far Indian economy has not been affected. We are still facing that shock, but we are able to manage it, because as World Bank and IMF projected that India's economy is the only economy in the world which will maintain the GDP growth rate of almost 8%. So it has not still affected on our international trade. It has still not affected on our export. Okay, and in fact, to a certain extent, as far as agriculture food products are concerned, we're getting benefit also. Okay, so this is type of benefits that we will ultimately get. And as this is again, if you can talk politically, that time also, as we know that India is in demand to join major groups like Quad. Quad at the eastern side, where Japan, Australia, and America are the members. America want India to become a very active part in this eastern Quad. At the same time, there is a western Quad also, where Israel, UAE, and America are the members. America also wanted India to join that, and India joined that Abraham Accord. And now there is another Quad. In fact, Donald Trump, the earlier president of America, he also, in fact, he wished that India to become a member of G7 also, that very powerful group of a nation. So India's international influence is bound to rise. India's rise is indispensable. It's unavoidable. So that benefit ultimately in a course of time India will get. I just wish to make a small announcement. Well, I mean, if in case, because sometimes at the spur of moment, it may not be possible for the students to get the questions also or understand the subject. But if in case in future also, if you want to get connected with me, I'm pretty active on my social media. I'm at my Twitter. Almost every hour I tweet, but I categorically tweet in Marathi, as I earlier clarified that I love to write and speak in Marathi. But it is my attempt to democratize international relation and foreign policy, because most of the discourse on international relation and foreign policy that exists in English language, and our people get deprived from getting that authentic knowledge. So my attempt is to democratize it and make it very simple to the common man, so that they can understand and coin their own views on the foreign policy and international relations. So I categorically write in Marathi. So I tweet almost on the contemporary issues at SK Deolankar. I have my Facebook page where I upload my all videos and my articles also, English and Marathi languages. Then Insta and other, you can always search me at SK Deolankar.
Thank you so much, sir. I have one question. This is Vasundhara Kashikar. So in the inside, do you think that Ukraine's decision of opting to join NATO was a wrong decision?
Yeah, absolutely wrong, because NATO is not ready to accept Ukraine.
Yes.
You know that Ukraine applied for the NATO membership in 2008. Now 2022. Almost 14 years, NATO has not taken the decision. NATO has already clarified that we cannot accept Ukraine as a member, because they have clarified that Ukraine is having the problems with Russia, the border problems with Russia. And we don't want any nation who is having the problem with the other nations as a member of NATO. So it was clarified to Ukraine pretty back. But despite of that also, Zelensky is, opting this West stand and try to instigate or agonize Russia unnecessarily. Now, there are several nations in Europe. They are neither the member of NATO nor the member of European Union, but they are economically doing well. So Ukraine can also do it well. And moreover, Ukraine is getting a lot of benefits, because this Nord Stream pipeline, through which Russia supplies gas to the Western Europe, that passes through Ukraine. And Ukraine is getting the annual, rent of that pipeline is $1 billion. Now they are at loss, unnecessarily at loss. Okay. They would have declared earlier that Ukraine did not have any intention to join NATO or European Union. They want to remain neutral or independent and want to, continue their growth by taking help of Russia also in Western Europe also. That could have been possible. So I don't know why this. I mean, Zelensky has already, in fact, he has also equally, responsible for this war. I cannot, give all, guilt or to the Russia. I mean, in that case, of course, Russia has violated the international law, but Russia is not the only nation who is guilty. Equally, Ukraine is also guilty. In the same way, it's a war of attitude, and that attitude, in fact, and that could have been possible. I mean, war could have been avoided. I mean, these are very simple issues. I mean, they could have sit across the table, deliberate it, and they could have sorted out the issues. Could have been sorted out. But now the war has already been erupted. Now it is almost, entering into the third week. Let's hope that it comes to an end. But it's always possible to remain neutral and get economically flourished.
Yeah, right, sir. Thank you so much. Anyone?
Sir, yes, ma'am. Sir, don't you feel that this war has been something of a miscalculation on both sides? As far as Zelensky is concerned, he would have never thought that his stance, obviously that NATO has not supported and none of the Western countries has come up to him, and his calculations have not gone as per his thought process. And similarly, even Putin, don't you feel, sir, that he would have calculated all these sanctions before going ahead into the invasion, and he has already sided with China beforehand? So don't you think he has catered for it? But then, yes, of course, this much of prolonged war he wouldn't have calculated, because for him he would have thought he will finish it in no time. So these miscalculations, how far do you think, sir, have gone wrong in both the cases?
Well, I mean, miscalculation not on the part of Ukraine, even it was the part of Russia also. I mean, there were miscalculation. They were under the impression that at least the eastern side of Ukraine, that is most of the Russian-speaking crowd or population is there. In fact, in Donbass area, even Donetsk, Luhansk, and even Kharkiv city. In fact, it was very difficult for Russia to conquer. I mean, the eastern part also. And in fact, under the initial plan, Russia was anticipated that they will conquer the Eastern Europe, Eastern Ukraine, maybe in a span of 3 to 4 days. But now it is still not possible. Even Kharkiv, the still battle is going on. Even Donetsk also battle is still going on. Now it has reached up to Kiev, but now they are getting the great resistance. In fact, it was not also anticipated and calculated by Russia. At the same time, Zelensky was also at wrong thing. Because earlier NATO and America both intimidated Russia that if in case Russia dare to attack on Ukraine, then it will be having very catastrophic implications for Russia, and they might have to feel the anger of NATO, that there is a possibility of involvement, direct involvement of NATO into the war. So he was also under that impression. But later on, he came to know that, I mean, even NATO is not ready to declare no-fly zone over the Ukraine. At that time, NATO is kept isolated from all these conflict. Even the same case with America also. So both were at the miscalculation. But I still feel, I mean, this is my personal opinion, that Zelensky could have avoided all this destruction and casualties. Even in the first week itself, when Russia attacked on Ukraine on 24th February, at that time, instead of fighting and other things, he could have now he's now he is giving the indications that he has no inclination to join NATO. This inclination could have been given 15 days earlier also. So why he waited for 15 days? And in that 15 days, Ukraine's ports, air bases, most of the cities have already been destroyed. So what ultimately Zelensky achieved out of this? Now he has come down to the terms of negotiation. Okay, now most of the demands of the Vladimir Putin, he has succumbed to those. It seems that he's succumbing to those demands. So it could have been done earlier also. So it could have, this all casualties and destruction could have been avoided. So miscalculation, it was done at the part of Ukraine also, Zelensky, and even at the part of Russia also.
Right, sir. Thank you.
First of all, really thanks for this enriching session. I think as it was already mentioned that you did explain many complex things, the way things are appearing on the surface, what are the reasons behind that. So it was great listening to you. Just one critical observation or critical point which you raised, sir, that now it is gone are the days when we used to thought that the traditional warfare is gone, and we still are more or less coming back to something like that is today is the only time for the trade wars rather than the war in conventional sense. Now that we have somebody like Mr. Putin who had shown that yes, war times are still not over, things can still happen. Apart from building of the arsenal and the building of arms race, which may start again, do you also see that like there are countries like Germany who they say that it is estimated around 60% of their requirement of as in fuels is coming from Russia. So apart from again joining this arms building race, do you also foresee that the countries may further try to become more Atmanirbhar, as they call it in say Indian parlance, that they would try to reduce their dependency on other countries so that in case of emergency, at least they have something to fall back on rather than just pandering to the demands of the opponent just because you have lots of dependency because of the trade. So do you see that there could be some disruption of international trade going on here just because of a few incidents like this which are happening lately?
Well, I don't foresee any such possibility. Why? Because I'm telling you, the war now almost has entered into the third week, but still the Russian supply of natural gas remains intact. Still, Russia is supplying 45% of its export to the European nations. They are still receiving the gas. Okay. And now, because why I'm telling you, I mean, most of the energy sources, I mean, of Western Europe that banks upon this natural gas, like we have the petrol and diesel, they have the natural gas over there. And you know that, I mean, supplying natural gas is not easy, I'm telling you, because it requires huge infrastructure, colossal infrastructure. And that infrastructure has already been constructed by Russia by spending billions of dollars. and that has been work that has been going on for last 2 decades. Okay, now ultimately it is yielding the result. Now half of the Europe is receiving the Russian gas, and Europe does not have the sources of natural gas. In fact, they have to bank upon this Russian gas. Otherwise, they will have to import it from America, and that is LNG. You know that LNG has first now it is needs to be converted into liquid, and it requires a lot of infrastructure. So American gas will be very costlier for them. Comparatively, the pipeline has already been constructed. So I don't think that there will be any disruption into that. And if you see that, I mean, in last the developments in last 3 to 4 months, I mean, America was threatening Russia and all trying to intimidate Russia. But in all these months, the Western European nations were pretty silent, and their silence was conspicuous. I mean, Germany was not ready to criticize or threatening Russia. France was not ready. Even in that case, England, see, that is a traditional ally of America. So there were some voices of criticism from the Britain, I mean, England. But see, the Austria, Netherlands, Belgium, they all, depend on Russian supply of Russian gas. They have a strong trade relations with Russia. And Russia is their largest supplier, not only of natural gas, but crude oil, then steel, then coal, and everything. Okay, so they did not want to get this relation disrupted. In case of Germany also, this is Nord Stream 2 pipeline, when both Russia and Germany spent billions of dollars, how they can get disrupted? I mean, this thing just because of political issues. So in future also, they will try to find some waivers from America. Okay, and still, as you know that, America, Japan, and Australia invoked the sanction, but the European nations, I mean, they are a little bit modest in their, declaration of sanctions, and they're still, appealing Russia to come down to the negotiation. So that's a very important aspect that you need to understand, that European nations, comparatively Western European nations, they did not want this war, get expanded or get, prolonged also, because ultimately the European nations will be at loss, and they cannot afford to have a very antagonistic relations with Russia, and even vis-a-vis, I mean, the same is the case with Russia also. So I don't think that even if they decide to become independent or Atmanirbhar, how will they get their natural gas? Because their economies are dependent on that. Okay. And that's the reason I argued, or I disseminated this information with you, that almost 50% of the requirement of natural gas is being borne by Russia. So where will they get it? So they don't have any other source, because Russia is the largest producer of natural gas. Okay. So even in future also, they will have to bank upon Russia for that matter. American gas will be extremely costly for them, because it requires insurance, it requires traveling costs, and it gets costly, like the American oil, which India, procuring under the American pressure. But American oil is pretty costly compared to the oil we procured from Iran and Saudi Arabia and Iraq also. Okay, but we are doing it in order to bridge the, trade deficit gap between India and America, that is almost $25 billion. And Trump used to pressurize us. Even Biden is also pressurizing us to, procure the crude oil from America. That's a different part. But the European nations, especially the Western European nations, they don't have any alternative but to bank upon that. So despite of their decision, because European nations have some limitations, see that they can produce the trucks, but they cannot, in case of producing the food grains, they have the problems. So they're almost 40% of their supply of wheat and corn being borne by Ukraine and Russia. So how can they do it? And they cannot do it immediately. And the whole process takes the time. So at least as far as the immediate future is concerned, the economic and trade relation between the Western Europe and Russia will remain intact, and there won't be any effect. I think collectively the Western European nations will bargain with America and try to get some type of waiver so that they can, continue with their trade with Russia.
Really, thanks, sir. So in the long run, things may slightly change, but in the short run, yes, status quo more or less is going to be maintained.
Remain.
No, really, thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So we'll be ending this session. From behalf of Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, sir, I thank you for honoring us with such an extensive lecture. And we are really glad that you could be present here, even if it's online. And sure, if it's possible, we can meet offline someday. And I'm sure all the students and faculties really had a good experience learning from you. I also thank all the organizers and Vasundhara ma'am for hosting this session so that we could learn more on the war that is going on. I thank all the technical team for supporting timely for this occasion. And lastly, thank you to the audience, the faculty and the students for being patient throughout the lecture series. Thank you again, sir.